And finally, before we wrap things up, I need to talk about this comparison between the Utah Jazz of 2019, 2020, or 2020, 2021, and the Atlanta Hawks back when they had Al Horford, back when they had Jeff Teague and those guys, back when they were winning 60 games a year and get fucked by LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals. I have to talk about this because this comparison it's not the same thing. It is not the same thing at all. Let me just pull up that team. Yeah. So 2014-15, the Atlanta Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals. They won 50 games and then got just destroyed by LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Utah Jazz are way better than the Atlanta Hawks were that year. Way better. First of all, yeah, the Hawks won 60 games and they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Back then, the East was even worse than it was today. Like back then, it was ridiculous. Years like 2015, like 2016 are the reason why the All-Star game is no longer East versus West. All right, just for some context there. The NBA didn't just decide, oh, let's do team captains just for fun. No, it was because the games are just like, there are the league's best players on the West, and then there's like LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony on the East, and like Dwayne. It was night and day around that sort of 2014 to 2016 sort of era. That was the era the Atlanta Hawks won 60 games in the East and made the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, the Eastern Conference Finals, we've seen some pretty shaky teams in the Eastern Conference Finals. They were led by Paul Millsap, Al Horford, and Jeff Teague. And DeMar Carroll, Kyle Korver was still shooting great. Dennis Schroeder was a bit younger, 21 years old. Okay, now that starting five, this is not anywhere close to as good as the Utah Jazz starting five. First of all, Donovan Mitchell. The Atlanta Hawks never had a Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy as clutch as Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy as electric as Donovan Mitchell. They never had a guy who could shoot like Mitchell, who could score like Mitchell, who could raise the roofs of stadiums like Donovan Mitchell. This man can take over basketball games. The Hawks never had that. Kyle Korver could catch heat. And okay, they definitely did have a guy who could shoot like Donovan Mitchell. But Kyle Korver, he could definitely catch heat. He was about 30. He was 33 years old back then. It wasn't the same Kyle Korver who was, it's not obviously not prime Kyle Korver, but he was a good shooter. He could catch heat, but not like Donovan Mitchell could. Jeff Teague was a nice player back then. That was probably prime Jeff Teague. Donovan Mitchell is far and away better than all these guys. It's not even close. It's always been a stars league, and Utah have by far the biggest star in Donovan Mitchell. Next, the Atlanta Hawks never had a Rudy Gobert. Their big men were Paul Millsap and Al Horford, who are like power forwards. Rudy Gobert, as much as you want to hate on him, as much as you want to disrespect him, as much as you want to, make fun of him, as much as you want to shit on him, as much as whatever it is. I understand Rudy Gobert gets a lot of hate, but there is no way that that anybody on this Atlanta Hawks team was as good as or was as valuable and impacted the game as much as Rudy Gobert did or does this year. Paul Millsap, he's nowhere near the defensive player that Rudy Gobert is. None of these guys could rebound the ball like Gobert, could defend the rim like Rudy Gobert, who could make an impact on the basketball court like Rudy Gobert could. None of them. The Utah Jazz are a far better shooting team than these guys. The Utah Jazz play more. They play better defense. They're much more they're better coached. I think Quinn Snyder, coach of the year easily. They have a better bench than these guys. They've got better shooters than these guys. The Utah Jazz literally have they're better in every aspect of the game than the Atlanta Hawks were in 2014-15. They just truly are. Now, if the Jazz lose in the second round or if they lose in the third round, they're not going to get swept. If a fully healthy Utah Jazz team plays in the playoffs, they could go up against the Lakers, the fucking Nets, the fucking whatever team you want. The Jazz, if they're losing a series, whenever it may be, first, second, third, fourth round, if the Jazz are losing in the playoffs, it's a 6 or 7 game series. This team is not getting swept. They're going to go up against the Lakers probably at one point, or the Clippers at one point, or a team like the Suns or the Blazers, a really good team like that, or shit, they might even make the NBA Finals. and go have to go up against that three-headed monster in Brooklyn. But they're not going to crash out of the playoffs. This team, they are going to grind out a series. They can grind out games, and they're going to grind out a series, and there's no way that you can prevent this team from catching heat at least once and just blowing you out of the water at least once in a series. This is what this team does. The Utah Jazz this year are far and away better than the Atlanta Hawks were back in 2014-15. If you want to make a comparison to the Atlanta Hawks in 2014-15, it should be to the current day Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, if anything, it should be them, because the 76ers are leading the NBA. They're in the Eastern Conference, and I just don't trust them the same way that I trust Utah Jazz.